Welcome to the deep dive. You send us the sources, we pull out the key insights, the stuff that really sticks with you. Today, we're kind of stepping into the shoes of the learner. That's someone like you, probably, curious, wants to get knowledge efficiently, but, properly.
Someone who loves those aha moments but doesn't want to feel totally overwhelmed by detail.
Exactly. And our source material today, it's excerpts from Kenzaburo Oe's novel 17. It's a translation from Japanese, of course.
Right. And Oe, he's quite a figure. Born 1935, Shikoku, studied French. His thesis was actually on Sartre.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he started publishing pretty early, in the late 50s. Le Face des Morts was one that got him noticed.
And didn't he win a big prize early on?
He did, yeah. The Akutagawa Prize in 58 for Gibeah de Lavage. That one was even adapted into a film in Bête Noire.
Okay. So 17 comes a bit later, 1961. What's the story behind that one?
Well, it was directly inspired by a pretty shocking real-life event, the assassination of a socialist leader by a 17-year-old ultranationalist.
Wow, okay.
So the novel really dives into that specific climate of early 60s Japan, the rise of imperial ultranationalism bubbling under the surface. It wasn't just history then, it was a very real tension.
And a controversial book at the time.
Hugely. Oe actually received threats from the Japanese far right after it came out. It's seen as really fundamental to his early work, something he even references later in Les années de nostalgie.
His life had some major turning points too, didn't it? I remember reading about his son.
Yes, the birth of his son, who had disabilities, profoundly impacted him and inspired Une affaire personnelle, a really powerful novel. He also wrote broader historical stuff like Le Jeu du siècle, and some lighter works too, like Une existence tranquille.
And he had interests beyond Japan.
Definitely. He was very interested in Latin American literature, even taught in Mexico for a while, all these different threads,
It all leads up to the Nobel Prize.
Exactly, in 1994. For his entire body of work, which consistently pushed back against established norms in Japan, giving voice to the anxieties of that whole post-war generation.
So our mission today with these 17 excerpts is what exactly?
It's really to explore the key elements, try and understand the protagonist's world, both internal and external, at this really pivotal age. Get under his skin a bit.
Okay, let's start right there. With his 17th birthday, what's the first thing that jumps out?
The sheer lack of recognition. It's almost brutal. His parents, his older brother, nothing. The day just happens.
Nobody says anything.
Only his older sister. She's a nurse, works at a self-defense forces hospital. She's myopic. And she's the only one.
And what does she say?
This is a really cryptic line, apparently, from a book. You have 17 years, don't you want to seize your own flesh?
Huh. Strange.
Yeah. And we learn a bit about her, too, why she works there, feels shame about her eyesight, why she hasn't married. She reads constantly.
So this one odd comment is the only connection he gets?
Pretty much. It just hangs there amidst all this family indifference.
Yeah.
It hints at something, maybe, but it's definitely unusual.
A very fleeting moment. And then boom, we're inside his head.
Right into his head, yeah. And it's intense, especially his developing sexuality.
That seems central.
It really is. He's preoccupied with it. And his exploration of masturbation is, well, quite detailed. What's interesting is how he mentions reading a sexology book that apparently removed any guilt.
So he's actively seeking information, questioning norms.
Seems like it. Using external knowledge to navigate his internal changes.
And the descriptions he gives of himself, they're very specific, almost clinical.
Oh, absolutely. Observing his own body, the penis, the glands, the foreskin, even mentioning smegma as lubricant. It's this intense, almost detached self-examination.
What do you think that tells us, that level of scrutiny?
Maybe it's about trying to understand, maybe even control his own body when he feels he has so little control over anything else. And he even invents this technique, right? To retain semen so he can masturbate discreetly, even in class.
Which again points to this secrecy, this private world he's building.
Exactly. And his fantasies aren't simple either. There's that disturbing image from a women's magazine, violence mixed with sexuality.
Yeah, that was unsettling. That hint of aggression.
It suggests some underlying anxiety, maybe confusion about intimacy, power, aggression, all tangled up.
And then his focus shifts outward slightly to his physique, his muscles.
Yes, but it's still intensely self-critical.
Yeah.
He has this sort of idealized image, strong on the beach.
Right.
But then he looks in the mirror and it just crashes. The disappointment is so sharp.
He really tears himself down.
Completely. He lists every flaw. Rebutting face, heavy skin, narrow forehead. It's just this litany of self-disgust.
Yeah.
Even being upset about retouched school photos shows how deep that dissatisfaction runs.
It's incredibly harsh.
OA really amplifies that adolescent self-consciousness, showing this profound insecurity.
And it connects to his feelings of shame, right? Like everyone can somehow see his private habits.
Yeah. Yes, this fear of exposure. It leads to humiliation and these shocking, violent fantasies wanting to machine gun everyone. It's just raw turmoil.
This gap between who he wants to be and who he feels he is, it just makes his birthday feel miserable.
Utterly miserable. And shapes his whole outlook. Very pessimistic. It's deep adolescent angst, but without any support system, it seems.
And that lack of support is really highlighted at the dinner table scene.
Oh, definitely.
Yep.
No mention of his birthday, of course. And just the general silence.
Because the father thinks talking during meals is vulgar.
Yeah, which says a lot about communication in that family, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the father being his censor at high school. It adds this layer about suppressed expression everywhere.
So it's an environment where he probably feels he can't voice anything.
Exactly. Plus, we learn he's not even feeling well tired, migraine, probably from, well, his earlier activities, so he's even more withdrawn.
The whole post-dinner scene sounds quite disconnected.
Very. Just quiet rituals. Tea, kimchi, glancing at the paper, the TV, just emotional distance.
Then there's that quick flashback being mocked for his height.
Yeah, by a Korean classmate. It seems small, but it introduces this theme of social status, his own vulnerability, maybe feeding that sense of inadequacy. It's subtle.
And that leads into the TV message from the Crown Prince and Princess.
Right, which is the trigger. His cynical comment, "Thieves of public funds putting on airs."
And that's what finally breaks the silence.
Yes, his sister reacts immediately, sharply. It just sparks this intense political argument.
He targets the royals and the self-defense forces specifically.
He does. It's clearly where his own developing political feelings lie, even if they're not fully articulated yet.
But his sister pushes back quite effectively.
Very. She doesn't just react emotionally. She offers pragmatic arguments for the self-defense forces, national security, jobs for young men from the countryside. It's grounded in practical concerns.
And he struggles to respond, even though he has these leftist leanings, has been involved in activism.
Yeah, he seems kind of stuck. He'd been in demos, written for the school paper against U.S. bases. But here, face to face with their arguments, he falters.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe his beliefs are more gut level at this point, less intellectually thought through. He ends up just dismissing her views as liberal Democratic Party rhetoric.
Instead of engaging with the points she's making.
Right. And she keeps challenging, asking about South Korea, about defending Japan without forces, questioning his reliance on the UN. She brings up the practical side of things.
She sounds quite well informed, or at least thoughtful, mentioning Soviet bases, her own observations of U.S. soldiers.
Yeah, she frames it in different ways. Security, job creation. She's looking at it from multiple angles.
And he feels like he's losing the argument.
You can sense his frustration. He internally dismisses her points as old woman's wisdom. He tries bringing up unemployment, blaming the government's policies.
But she counters again.
She does. Points to the post-war recovery, economic development under conservative governments, the fact that most people vote for them. It highlights that tension between his ideals and the perceived reality for many.
Which leads to his big outburst.
Yeah, cursing Japan's prosperity, wishing the country would perish. It's incredibly raw, just pure alienation.
How does his sister react to that?
She flinches just for a moment, then gives this really cold critique of the left hypocrisy on democracy, rearmament, benefiting from the system while blaming it. She even says she'd want to be a progressive worker if she could. It shows her perspective as maybe more complex than he gives her credit for.
It really paints a picture of the political divides within society, playing out right there in the family.
Absolutely. And while all this is happening, the father and brother are just absent.
The father's deliberately reading the newspaper, that American liberal parenting style, he claims.
Yeah, which contrasts sharply with how a former student apparently saw him despised, untrusted.
Yeah.
It suggests he's more about maintaining an image, avoiding anything difficult.
Probably linked to his own career struggles, you mentioned.
Very likely. Fear of rocking the boat, leading to this emotional distance, this critical edge, rather than engagement.
So the argument ends with the protagonist storming off.
Yes, kicking the table, spilling tea, likening it to urine, which is quite a visceral image. And the father's reaction is just ice cold.
That's a leftist missing the target.
Just dismissive, fueling the protagonist's rage even more, which leads to that awful moment.
The violence against his sister.
He kicks her in the forehead. She falls, bleeds. It's sudden, shocking, and the detail of the blood on his own toe. It makes it horribly real.
And the father's response to that?
Still cold, utterly practical. No emotion, just consequences. Her tuition help, gone. His options: Tokyo University for lower fees, earn a living, or the Self-Defense Forces University. That's it.
Chilling, just laying out the grim reality.
It leaves the protagonist feeling this icy coldness. He retreats.
To the shed, his refuge.
Yeah, this space he's made his own, like a ship's cabin.
Right.
No electricity, totally separate. It's his escape.
And that's where he finds the dagger.
Yes, this antique dagger, signed by a famous swordsmith, is quite a discovery, and it seems to unlock something in him.
These fantasies of violence, the imaginary sword fighting.
He's fighting these imagined enemies in the dark.
But the enemies are vague, aren't they? Father, sister, soldiers, politicians.
Exactly. It's not specific. It suggests this generalized rage against, well, everything.
Yeah.
Authority, family, society. It's his internal conflict playing out.
But then that shifts again. Remorse.
Yeah, the anger fades, and he feels regret for hurting his sister. He has this extreme thought, sacrificing his own eye for her.
What do you make of that? Wanting to offer his own flesh.
It feels like a desperate attempt at atonement, maybe? A sense that only a physical sacrifice can balance the scales. He feels like a coward if he doesn't pay with his own blood, his own body. It shows this internal struggle with his own sense of morality, however warped.
It's intense, but it doesn't last.
No, he puts the dagger back, lies there, and feels invaded by demon voices and figures, just pure mental anguish.
And then he hears music from the house.
Miles Davis. Modern jazz. It's his older brother's music.
Which contrasts with the chaos he's feeling.
Completely. And it makes him think back to the argument, how his brother was just absorbed in building a model airplane. Totally oblivious.
That image of detachment, the camera capturing unnoticed details.
Yeah, it really emphasizes the brother's withdrawal. We learned about his past. He was brilliant, the family's hope, Tokyo uni grad, passionate journalist.
But something changed.
Drastically. Fatigue, leave of absence, came back taciturn, obsessed with jazz and models, disengaged from everything: work, politics, family. He even broke a promise to take the protagonist climbing.
So the protagonist feels abandoned by him too.
Utterly. Lost respect, feels completely alone in that house. He sees himself as this solitary 17-year-old needing guidance that just isn't there.
And it's into this vacuum that Bandit the cat walks in.
Right. Bandit, this big, tough, stray, known troublemaker. The family doesn't usually do pets, too stingy, so Bandit's presence is significant.
And the protagonist tries to connect with him.
Desperately. It highlights his yearning for any kind of connection, even with this wild animal.
That moment where he thinks Bandit is acknowledging his birthday?
Yeah, it's quite touching. But he immediately corrects himself, remembering Bandit's just a rogue. And then he tries to offer the cat his saliva.
What's that about?
It's such a strange, primal gesture. Maybe offering the only thing he feels is truly his own. A desperate attempt to bridge the gap. But Bandit stays wary, resists being held.
Just like the protagonist feels constrained.
Possibly. He admires Bandit's wildness, his independence, his lack of shame, everything he feels he lacks.
He tries to grab Bandit, gets scratched.
Yeah, another failed connection. But it leads to this admiration for Bandit's untamed nature. Even his ruthlessness, later when he sees him kill another cat.
He envies Bandit.
Deeply. Envies his simple existence, free from the self-consciousness that tortures him. He feels trapped in his own feeble brain, his own body. He longs to be like Bandit, or just escape himself.
Escape the gaze of others and his own self-scrutiny.
Exactly. He even envies Bandit's potential dreams, assuming they must be less tormented than his own nightmares.
Which brings us back to his own deep fears, particularly the fear of death.
Yes. In the dark shed, closing his eyes, he anticipates the terror, this overwhelming fear of nothingness, of oblivion.
And it's linked to that physics class incident.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It wasn't just fainting. It was a full-blown existential crisis, triggered by the idea of infinite emptiness. Screaming, losing control. The shame was immense.
So he lied, said it was epilepsy.
Yes, to hide the real reason, the sheer terror and the humiliation. And the nightmare recurs being alone at the edge of infinity. It's a core trauma.
And then there's that strange reaction to the crown princess's marriage.
Yeah, that's quite puzzling. The fear, the chest pain, feeling like she's going to die, praying for the wedding to be canceled. It doesn't seem like jealousy.
What could it be then?
Maybe some kind of projection. Identifying with her perceived vulnerability in a system, maybe. And his reaction to the boy who threw a scone at her. Finding out the boy also had her photo, dreaming he was both of them. It's complex, unresolved. He himself asks, why was it thus?
He doesn't understand his own feelings.
Not at all. And that fear of death hits him hard right then in the shed. He's sweating, desperate for comfort.
Wishing he could marry quickly or become part of a tree.
Anything to escape the feeling of annihilation, of total solitude. He feels the world belongs to others. He has no allies, no real friends.
Which circles back to politics briefly, considering the Communist Party.
As a way to belong, maybe? To escape its loneliness? But then he remembers the argument with his sister.
Doubting his own understanding.
Yeah, realizing he couldn't even defend his leftist ideas against her. He feels he doesn't really understand anything deeply, can't see any grand oak tree to become part of. He doubts joining without real belief would help his anxiety anyway.
He feels they wouldn't take him seriously.
Especially after losing the argument to his sister. He just yearns for something simple, certain, passionate, but feels incapable of finding it.
So, defeated, he goes back to his bunk.
And resorts to masturbation again. Forced this time, just to escape the anxiety, even knowing it'll mess up his exams.
It's a cycle of temporary escape followed by more self-loathing.
Pretty much. The sounds of the city, the spring scents, they just make his anguish worse.
That mantra, happy birthday, touch yourself and masturbate, it's bleak.
Incredibly bleak. And even his fantasies are troubled. His parents, the sudden thought he might be illegitimate.
No escape even then.
Only for that fleeting moment of orgasm. There's a flash of positive imagery. Flowers, hot springs, Vegas lights. He wishes his whole life could be like that.
Just pure sensation, no thought, no fear.
But it vanishes instantly. He's back in the dark on his miserable 17th birthday, just collapsing into sobs.
Wow. So these excerpts, they really paint a picture of intense turmoil.
Absolutely. A powerful, raw look inside a 17-year-old grappling with isolation, sexuality, self-hatred, family dysfunction, political confusion, and this overwhelming fear of death.
It really anchors it in that specific time and place, 1960s Japan, with all those societal pressures.
Definitely. But as you think about this, maybe consider how these struggles, the search for identity, for belonging, the anxieties, how they might echo broader experiences of adolescence, you know, across different times and cultures.
That's a great point. What might the rest of his story hold after these formative, clearly quite damaging experiences? That's something to ponder.